This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Fortal School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 5th of October, 2021, and I am 2M.
I am CS.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Pandora's box. In the Standard, Uhuru owns up to Pandora leaks. In the Star, we can account for our offshore billions, Uhuru. And the People Daily, Uhuru, secret money dossier good for Kenya. CS.
Pandora Papers. The way the local media has picked up the story on the leaked documents will unfortunately leave most people with false impressions about whether the president is hiding proceeds of corruption in foreign bank accounts. The problem is, if we allow these false impressions to fester in the minds of Kenyans, then it will go some way in delegitimizing the president's fight against corruption. Investigative journalists will have helped corruption fight back by allowing the president's moral authority to be stolen. And by the way, we find the timing suspicious. Wouldn't it be quite convenient for the proponents and purveyors of rot if Kenyans were also made to believe that the president is corrupt while he is front and center in the crusade against ill-gotten wealth? And so on this panel, we deem it our duty to speak facts to stupidity. The Public Officers Ethics Act, Section 26, deals with the wealth declaration of public officers. It requires public officers to declare the income, assets, and liabilities of the public officer, their spouse, and dependent children under the age of 18. The public officer in this case is President Uhuru KENYATTA. His wife is Mama Margaret KENYATTA. The president has no children under the age of 18 years. So, was the president's wife mentioned? No. Were the president's children mentioned? Zero. So who was mentioned? The president, his mother, Mama Ngina KENYATTA, and the president's siblings. But the question that logically follows is this. Are Mama Ngina KENYATTA and the president's siblings public officials? No. Does the Public Officers Ethics Act say anything about extended family? Nothing. Granted, the president was mentioned, and he is a public official. But in what capacity was he mentioned? He was mentioned as being the person who will inherit the particular assets that were mentioned and which are owned by Mama Ngina KENYATTA in the unfortunate event of her demise. This means that currently it is not the president's and he is not earning any income from it. And there is nothing corrupt or illegal in the president's mother planning her children's inheritance. Or is there? If anything, this information that was hacked and leaked is an invasion of the privacy of the president's family, contrary to the Constitution and our data protection laws.
That's right.
In fact, Article 31 of the Constitution provides that every person has a right to privacy, which includes the right not to have information relating to their family or private affairs unnecessarily required or revealed.
Absolutely.
It is the president who is supposed to declare his wealth, not his sisters, not his brother, and not his mother. They are neither elected nor appointed officials. So then we ask, what is the point of leaking this private information? Are we saying that the president's extended family is not supposed to have any money? Are they supposed to all live on the president's salary? Are we saying that the president is not a Kenyan citizen with rights and that he cannot get an inheritance? I'm struggling to understand what the controversy is.
Yes.
And by the way, there's no provision in the law that says Kenyans cannot have bank accounts in other countries. None.
Yes.
That would be taking us back to the Moi days of a combined economy, when one even needed permission from the central bank even just to have foreign currency. The only provision that restricts having foreign bank accounts is found in Article 76 of the Constitution, but it only applies to state officers. And even then, it provides that even state officers can have foreign bank accounts if they get approval from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, as per Section 19 of the Leadership and Integrity Act. But in any case, that does not even concern the president because it is his mother that has a foreign account. He is simply a son whose mother is thinking about the future. And that is not a crime.
Absolutely.
Kenyans need to understand that in the war against corruption, the problem is not being wealthy. The problem is if it is stealing that made you wealthy. The problem is not how much money you have.
Yes.
The problem is when you can't explain how you got it.
Woo.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Wakili. Wakili.
Woo.
Yes.
What a persuasive argument against these Pandora papers.
It is so declassified.
It is. It is so declassified. Good one. Now let me speak a little bit about tax havens, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Today I'd like to talk about the treasure islands called tax havens and tell you why they exist and persuade you that they actually are beneficial to country.
Yeah.
But before I do so, allow me to give a brief history of tax havens.
Yeah.
So the first tax havens emerged at the end of World War I. As you can imagine, world wars are expensive. And after World War I, many European nations raised income taxes in an effort to rebuild communities and assist veterans. An extreme case of punitive post-war taxation was in France. In 1924, the country had slapped a 72% income tax on the affluent citizens of its country. 72%.
Woo.
Can you imagine? Income tax.
Yeah.
Similar tax increases were popping up across the European continent.
Yeah.
And as a result, wealthy Europeans devised methods for avoiding these punitive taxes.
Yeah.
And the most common method, by moving their money to other countries.
Yeah.
Now, Switzerland became the most trusted tax haven since it had been a neutral state during the First World War.
Yeah.
It was untouched by combat and had no reason to raise taxes. It didn't need to rebuild.
Yeah.
And it also had a well-established banking network with high interest rates for those who invested their money there. So the number of havens, in Switzerland, they thrived. But then, many years later, in the 1980s, these tax havens began to proliferate around Europe.
Yeah.
When the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher deregulated Britain's financial markets, allowing cities like London and Hong Kong, as well as the British territories like the Virgin Islands,
Yes.
to compete with Switzerland in
Yes.
the private wealth management market.
Fantastic.
And so tax havens then began to crop up
Yes.
right, left, center, and this whole tax competition began amongst countries.
Yeah.
Now, this whole idea of the ability to economic freedom, let me put it that way. It's at the cornerstone of the fundamental freedoms and rights which are owed to every single Kenyan, courtesy of the 2010 Constitution.
Yeah.
Economic freedom is the fundamental right, no doubt about it, of every human to control his or her labor, their property, and anything. And that includes passing it on to whom you deem it fit to pass it on to once in the event of demise.
Yeah.
In an economically free society such as ours, individuals are free to work, they're free to produce, consume, and invest in any way they so please. So one thing that John Alanamo glossed over, and these Panama people or Pandora people glossed over, is the fact that the KENYATTA family, first of all, acquired these interests before Uhuru became president.
Yeah.
Uhuru, first of all, is a citizen of this country before he is a president of this country.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you don't know that, go and read your constitution. Ni katiba mbichi yenye mlipitisha 2010. Go read it. You're first a citizen of the Republic of Kenya before you are even eligible to become
Yes.
president of this republic. Yeah. So he enjoys the rights of every Kenyan, and once he retires, as he will go back to his life as an ordinary citizen, and so will everybody in his family. Why should we discriminate against him? Is he not a Kenyan like any one of us? Yeah? But tax havens also are a good thing for country because they facilitate a healthy dose of tax competition. Tax competition is competition between governments or taxing authorities to lower tax rates, to incentivize businesses to relocate to their jurisdictions. On an international level, countries like Ireland, Luxembourg, and Malta have received huge benefits by lowering corporate tax rates, income taxes, and so on and so forth. So major companies, finally, like Apple, Intel, Google, Facebook, they're all domiciled in these countries, these tax havens, these treasure islands, where they've got like between a 5% to a 10% corporate income tax or less. So this is an invitation to the country to reconsider its
Jim,
tax rate.
you might be headhunted by the KRA after that education you've given us.
Headhunted? Will come for him.
Headhunted, in another way. Okay.
But James, such a compelling argument. And you know what, after that, I will not mention anything to do with the Pandora Papers, but I want to paint a picture of a William Ruto presidency. And what it reminds me of, Venezuela under Hugo Chavez. Now, Hugo Chavez and William Ruto are political twin brothers. Just like Ruto, Chavez was charming, generous to a fault, a smooth operator, and much loved by the masses. The man was loved by evangelicals, and that's because when Chavez spoke, his speeches sounded like Sunday sermons. He invoked God in every single speech. There's not a single preacher that did not have a picture with Chavez. However, Chavez messed up Venezuela through populism. He nationalized private assets across every sector in the economy, from oil to finance to gold to industry to agriculture. Large private businesses were taken over by the Chavez administration. Why did he do this? He told the masses that they were poor because the rich had taken their wealth. And so, to create an even playing field, Chavez told Venezuelan hustlers that all private wealth would be shared equally amongst every Venezuelan. They clapped like a nonsense, knowing there would finally be wealth distribution. Little did they know it was all a farce. To cut a long story short, nationalization under Chavez messed up Venezuela for good. In just 14 years of his rule, a country that had the largest oil reserves in the world had an inflation rate of 1 million %. Over 90% of the country tanked below the poverty line. Not a single coin went to the masses, and because he'd promised them oil dollars. Over 100 companies that employed millions of people closed shop and left. Now, the country had gone to the dogs. What's the point of my story here? If William Ruto's agenda is to chant Bona Asifiwe to us every time he gets the mic, he's no different from Hugo Chavez. If William Ruto says the masses are poor because of the rich, he's no different from Hugo Chavez. If William Ruto wants to nationalize Safaricom, NCBA, Finlays, ABSA, or even KQ in order to redistribute wealth, him and Chavez are one and the same. And therefore, the question begs, if hustlers will elect the Hugo Chavez reincarnate, how will Kenya look in 10 years' time? If it took just 14 years to destroy Latin America's crown jewel, how many years will it take for Ruto to destroy Kenya?
Really good points there that you've made. We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge headlines. We ask ourselves, are they topical, speculative, repetitive, groundbreaking, and thoughtful, just plain lazy? What do you gentlemen think about the headlines of today?
PD.
Okay.
Good.
PD. Uhuru. Secret money dossier good for Kenya.
Okay, I see why.
That's good.
I think we give it to the PD.
Absolutely.
So we toss the rest of the headlines.
Absolutely.
And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also don't forget to subscribe and follow us on our Instagram and TikTok and Twitter handles. All the above. You can find me on Maina wa Kangema. I don't know about you, gents.
You can find me at Kmaina Kandabongo on Twitter and on TikTok.
You can find me at Chakasichangi on Twitter.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what is our final thought?
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled A Field Guide to Lies, Critical Thinking in the Information Age by Professor Daniel Levitin.
This week, our final thought readings are inspired by the theme critical thinking. And today we present to you a brief fifth estate analysis of an international bestseller titled A Field Guide to Lies, Critical Thinking with Statistics and the Scientific Method, authored by neuroscientist Professor Daniel Levitin. The premise of the book explores the ways in which each of us can be fooled and misled by numbers and logic, and the kind of critical thinking we therefore need to overcome this by equipping ourselves with the tools to differentiate good information from bad. Professor Daniel Levitin essentially presents to us a masterclass on evidence-based reasoning and how to evaluate data wisely, how to spot problems with the facts you encounter, especially in an information age, and also how to dissect truth claims in a world where we have been led to believe that numbers don't lie, and yet we often don't realize that numbers can mislead, misdirect, and obfuscate. The book is presented in 3 parts. The first section of the book includes mishandled statistics and graphs. The second includes faulty arguments and the steps we can take to better evaluate news, advertisements, and social media posts. The third part of the book explores what underlies our brain's ability to determine if something is true or false. The scientific method. It contends with the challenge of what we can and cannot know. Professor Levitin argues that thinking critically doesn't mean we disparage everything. It means that we try to distinguish between claims with evidence and those without. It means we try to avoid the extremes of gullibly accepting every claim we encounter, like the Pandora papers, or cynically rejecting every one. On that note, I conclude with this insight from the book. A fact is something that is known to be true. Everything else is either a fact in waiting, that is, waiting to be verified, or an outright lie.
I love the chapter on how journalists and reporters can lead us astray. And they do this because they use 2 modes of thinking when they're telling us a story. In mode 1, journalists report on scientific findings, which are probably based on thousands of observations and a great amount of data. In mode 2, journalists report on events, which are often based on the accounts of only a few witnesses. Now, because reporters have to work in both of these modes, they sometimes confuse one for the other. They sometimes forget that the plural of anecdote is not data. They forget to know that a bunch of stories or casual observations do not make factual conclusions. Now, that is how a friend of ours called John Allen Namu can go ahead and publish matope called Pandora Papers and end up making Kenya look very poor. In fact, if you listen to him, you'd think Kenya has only 1 billionaire who's capable of banking money in offshore accounts. In fact, when you listen to some of the global journalists speak of offshore tax havens, they make them seem evil. And that's because the journalist is either carrying out a smear campaign or is simply incapable of understanding the subject matter. But then again, journalists are not so much to blame. People generally don't like facts. They love stories.
That's right.
And that's why stories of wealth, death, love, extravagance, religion are so irresistible. That's why you'll never find a Pandora's list of poor people.
Absolutely. You know, my grandmother used to say that people will never discuss poor people. People always only discuss people with money. It is a fact of life. If you don't have money, if you're not a person of means, you are inconsequential.
Absolutely.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's a ruthless fact of life. You know? Sindio,
that's the point, man.
the fact of the matter is they're all aspiring.
Yeah.
And secretly they all aspire and admire and want to be like it.
And everyone in the Pandora's papers is actually secretly admired. All those Kenyans that are hating, they want to be in that list.
They want to be in that list. We all want there. Anyway, I'd like to talk about 2 phenomena. Cherry picking and selective windowing. Cherry picking is the tendency to arrive at a conclusion and then selectively look for evidence to support that view. Selective windowing. This occurs when the information you have access to is unrepresentative of the whole. For example, if you are looking at a city through the window of a train, you're only seeing a part of that city. This is what the author is telling us, and not necessarily a representative part of it, not a whole of it. So to remain objective and informed, you mustn't ignore contradictory evidence. You must also tend to look at the bigger picture. Things must be seen in context. Once again, I'm going to take on John and Alan Namu on his most recent Africa Uncensored documentary. You know, what he did there was to cherry pick and selective windowing. What he did not tell Kenyans is that we exist in an international global capitalist system where tax havens are part of the rules of the game, especially if you want to compete and dominate global markets. Now, we are a country made up of entrepreneurs with a global mindset. Some of you watching us today are tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 entrepreneurs, aspiring to conquer global markets. Now, in order for you to reach the tier 1 and 2 levels, guess what? You have to move a part of your operations into the treasure islands that are called tax havens. Otherwise, you will collapse.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something about tier 1 business people. Where I come from, a place called Radia in Kangema, also known as the capital of capitalism. The wealthy elite there, people like Equity Bank, people like Britam, people like Centam, people like Jimna, people like Royal Media Services, you name them. They have some part of their businesses registered offshore. Why? Because it makes business sense. And these are people who have an international mindset. They want to compete at the global level. Not to compete
with chicken sellers.
You know, with the chicken sellers. Some people, I don't know where. Hustler mentality. And who have they learned those practices from? As I said, we exist in an international global capitalist system. So they have learned these rules from the West, from the multinational corporations that rule the world. Take a company like Starbucks, for example. Let me tell you how it operates. That profits from your coffee, you coffee farmers. If you buy a coffee from Starbucks somewhere in Atlanta, for example, you know, who profits? You know, this is the question. Who has generated that profit, and how should that profit be repatriated back to the people who deserve it? Now, should it be the individual cafe? Should it be the farmers, the coffee farmers, or maybe the owner of the brand? Well, Starbucks, being a rational business mind and player, argues that the profit was generated by their brand. After all, they say, you don't just want coffee, you're there for the experience, you know, that whole Frappuccino thing. So Starbucks has established a separate subsidiary somewhere in one of these islands that owns the rights to its brand. Now, follow me here. I'm just about to finish. The main Starbucks company incorporated in the US pays money to the subsidiary incorporated in a treasure island in order to buy the right to use its brand. So the company, domiciled in a jurisdiction which has high tax rates, pays fees to its subsidiary. But it's not just that. It doesn't end there. The Starbucks subsidiary, of course, which has been incorporated in a country where the tax rate is like 1%, can charge Starbucks any amount of money for this thing called the brand service. So the subsidiary, where taxes are about 1%, are the ones who receive the lump sum of the revenue, and they're the ones who keep the profits. That's how it works in the international global capitalist system. And those rules apply not just to corporates, but also to individuals.
My takeaway from what you've submitted to us, JM, is that it's either you're a participator or a spectator.
Absolutely. Now, you hustlers, you want to be spectating.
Gossiping who has made what.
Precisely. You will, and even your children and your children's children. Watashinda hapo tu with the pigeons. Anyway, today we had a winning headline from the People Daily. I'd like to leave you with a quote that reminds me a lot of the Hustler Nation. It reminds me a lot of William Ruto. And this is a Marxist one. And it's a slogan that was popularized by Karl Marx. And this is a dedication to the Hustler Nation, but also to the owners of capital, so that we can make sure that we preserve the capitalist system, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Have a good evening. Thank you for tuning in. God bless.